Some people don't leave footprints in the digital world, and somehow that silence says more than 1,000 posts ever could. While everyone else is speaking, sharing, reacting, proving they exist, you remain invisible. Not because you have nothing to say, but because somewhere along the way, you learned that being seen comes with a cost, a quiet, unspoken cost. It's easy for others to assume things about you, that you're antisocial, that you're disconnected, that you're missing out. But what they don't see is the invisible wall you've built, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. Because for you, social media doesn't feel like connection, it feels like exposure, like standing in a crowded room where everyone is watching, even when they're not. And maybe this didn't start with social media at all. Maybe it started much earlier, in the small moments no one noticed, the times you shared something real and it was ignored, or misunderstood. Or worse, judged. Those moments don't seem big on the surface, but they stack quietly over time, like drops filling an unseen well. Psychologists sometimes call this microtrauma, tiny emotional cuts that don't bleed, but never fully heal. So you adapted. You learned that silence is safer than expression, that privacy is protection, that if no one sees you, no one can misinterpret you. Social media then becomes more than just an app. It becomes a stage. And for someone who has learned to associate visibility with vulnerability, stepping onto that stage feels like stepping into danger. There's also something deeper at play, something more subtle, a kind of emotional exhaustion. Because social media isn't just about sharing your life, it's about performing it, curating it, compressing your existence into moments that can be consumed by others. And for some people that feels unnatural, almost like trying to pour an ocean into a glass. So instead of forcing themselves into that mold, they withdraw. Not because they don't have depth, but because they have too much of it to simplify. And then there's the quiet awareness, the one most people try to ignore. That constant comparison is inevitable. Even if you don't want it, it seeps in. You see lives edited to perfection, smiles that don't show the cracks underneath, achievements displayed without the failures that came before them. And slowly, without realizing it, you start measuring your unfiltered life against someone else's highlight reel. For someone already sensitive to emotional shifts, this isn't harmless. It's corrosive. So choosing not to engage isn't always avoidance. Sometimes it's preservation, like refusing to drink from a well you know is poisoned. But here's the part most people misunderstand. Just because someone isn't visible online doesn't mean they aren't deeply aware of the world around them. In fact, it's often the opposite. People who stay away from social media tend to observe more, feel more, think more. They're not distracted by the constant noise, so their inner world becomes louder, richer, sometimes heavier. They notice the pauses in conversations, the things people don't say, the subtle shifts in tone, in energy, in presence. While others are busy documenting life, they're quietly experiencing it in its rawest form. And that can be both a gift and a burden, because when you experience life deeply, you also feel its weight more intensely. This is where something called ambiguous loss quietly enters the picture. It's the kind of loss that doesn't have a clear shape. Not a breakup, not a death, but a lingering sense that something is missing. A connection that was never fully formed. A version of yourself that never felt safe enough to exist openly. Social media promises connection, but for some it only amplifies that sense of distance, because it shows you how easily others seem to belong, while you're still trying to understand what belonging even feels like. So you step back, not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly, like closing a door without making a sound, and over time that silence becomes part of your identity. You become the person who doesn't post, doesn't share, doesn't participate. And while that protects you, it also creates a strange kind of isolation, because the world has started to equate presence with proof of existence. If you're not seen, are you even there? That question lingers more than you'd like to admit. Because deep down, you do want connection. You do want to be understood, but not at the cost of losing yourself in the process. Not in a space that rewards surface-level expression over depth. So you exist in this in-between space. Connected, but distant. Present, but unseen. And sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, you wonder what it would feel like to just exist freely, without that invisible wall, to express without calculating, to be seen without fear of being misunderstood. But then another thought follows right behind it. What if the wall isn't just protecting you? What if it's also keeping something out? Or maybe keeping something in? Because walls don't just block danger, they also block warmth. And slowly, almost invisibly, the protection begins to turn into distance. You stop sharing not just online, but in small, real-life moments too. You hesitate before speaking, filter your thoughts before they fully hold parts of yourself back even when it feels safe. Not because you want to be distant, but because distance has become your default language. And over time, this creates a quiet contradiction inside you. You crave connection, but resist visibility. You want to be understood, but struggle to be seen. So people assume you're fine on your own, independent, self-contained, and maybe you are in many ways. But independence can sometimes be a beautifully disguised form of loneliness, not the loud kind, not the kind that demands attention, but the soft, persistent kind that sits with you in silence. And this is the hidden consequence no one talks about. When you remove yourself from spaces where people express, share, and connect, even imperfectly, you also remove the chance to be discovered in unexpected ways. Not just by others, but by yourself, because expression isn't just about being seen. It's about understanding what exists within you, and when expression is constantly held back, parts of you remain undefined, like stories that were never told, emotions that were never given language. But here's where the shift begins. What if avoiding social media was never the problem? What if it was the way you learned to associate visibility with danger that needed to be understood, not erased? Because your instinct to protect your inner world isn't weakness, it's intelligence. It means you value depth over noise, meaning over attention, truth over performance, and that's rare. The goal, then, isn't to force yourself into a space that feels unnatural or to suddenly become someone who shares everything. The goal is much quieter than that. It's to gently question the fear attached to being seen, to realize that visibility doesn't have to mean exposure. That expression doesn't have to mean performance. That being seen doesn't always lead to being hurt. It can also lead to being understood in ways you have never experienced before. And maybe the first step isn't even social media. Maybe it's smaller than that. Saying one honest thing when you would normally stay silent. Letting someone see a thought before you've perfected it. Allowing yourself to exist just a little more openly in spaces that feel safe. Because healing doesn't come from tearing the wall down all at once. It comes from creating small openings, letting light pass through little by little, and if one day you choose to step into the digital world, not to perform, not to prove, but simply to express, then it won't feel like a stage anymore. It will feel like an extension of your voice. And if you don't, that's okay too, because your worth was never defined by your visibility. It was defined by your ability to feel deeply in a world that often avoids feeling altogether. But just remember this, you don't have to disappear to stay safe. You don't have to stay silent to stay whole. There is a version of you that can exist without fear, not because the world has changed, but because your relationship with being seen has. And maybe, just maybe, the wall you built wasn't a prison. It was a pause, a space where you learned who you are before deciding how much of that you want to share. So take your time, move gently, and when you're ready, let yourself be seen, not all at once, but in honest fragments, because even fragments can form something beautiful when they're real. And if this quiet story felt a little too familiar, then maybe you're not as alone in your silence as you thought.